All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Palantir Weekly. We are here after 2 weeks of a break, and we've got a lot to talk about in the world of Palantir, the stock, different stuff that has happened with the companies, some individuals that actually went to DC at their offices to visit them, and obviously Palantir CEO Alex Karp put out a book, and that book is definitely making some headlines. So we got a lot to talk about. I'm here today with Amir, Dom, Arnie, and Matt. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Very good.
Good.
We'll start with you, Arnie, because you had a little bit of a tear in your eye. We'll just get right into it. Palantir is down 30% since we last talked. Last time we talked, it was at 125. Now it's at 85. How are you feeling?
Well, do you remember that you asked the same question just after the Q4 results? And my answer was like, rich. Finally. And it's like, oh, poor again. Well, I can't really complain, okay? But I think it gives you a perspective on how strong is the psychological factor in investing. Like, we're essentially at the same prices we were just before Q4. But it feels like, oh, that's so bad. And essentially, in these last days, I was bombarded by people. Oh, but this is scary. This is, look at that pre-market. And it's like, yes, but at the end of the day, it means that we had a sort of irregular jump, or maybe just too strong jump. And how markets work, sometimes you go a little bit overstretch in one direction. Sometimes you go a little bit on the overstanding in the other direction. So at the end of the day, it's a process called price discovery. You try to hit the boundaries to see also how people react to those different boundaries. And over time, the price converges to what the company is truly worth, or at least at what people think it is worth. So I consider this volatility part of the day. And what to me is really important, but I think we'll go deeper later, is there is no a specific narrative or thesis breaker here. Like Palantir is down. People will tell you because Karp sold, because I don't know, what was the other... yes, the defense budget cuts. And it's like, that is the narrative. That is not really the reality. Otherwise, you would not see Palantir essentially cloning the stock price movement of Robinhood. Just to give you, like very simply, if Palantir stock moves exactly like Robinhood, which has nothing to do with it apart from being in the high beta cluster, that's a hint to me that there is nothing really wrong with Palantir. It's more, okay, asset managers, gestorazzi, essentially wanted to cut the exposure to over like a super high beta because we're scared. Let's go more conservative and let's buy Apple that is a more conservative stock. We see that, for instance, stuff like Apple and the big tech in general moved way less. So that's my reading.
Okay. Matt Money, your raw reaction to the 30% decline from the top.
Excited, and not because I am feeling convicted, right? And the whole macroeconomic environment right now has been challenged with tariffs and things of the like. So, but I think to me, and it's not just about Palantir. It's just things seemed like they were running off a little bit off the top too much. And to me, as somebody that always is looking for the long term, 10, 15 years out, and is eventually going to use these opportunities and in the portfolio to borrow against for living or for borrowing other assets or building other assets, I want to get these at cheaper prices. So buying stuff like Rocket Lab, buying stuff at Palantir. Well, I haven't started buying Palantir yet, but it's starting to at least pique my interest, being down 30-35% for the peaks. It makes me excited to know that we're that much closer to being able to actually start dollar cost averaging into the stock again. So for me, I'm excited, and I don't want anybody to lose money. So hopefully that doesn't come across crass. of course, apologies, but for me, I'm a long-term kind of minded investor, and I'm going to continue to buy the stock. I want to get to 10,000 shares. I haven't gotten there yet. So if I have the opportunity to, I would love to get there.
Dom, your thoughts on this price action?
I was on mute. My bad. Yeah, no. I feel like you never arrive when you fully have an investing career. It's a journey, but I will say I felt really comfortable in the fact that I have a very concentrated portfolio. So Nvidia, Tesla, Palantir. I mean, 90% of my overall wealth took a substantial hit, in the last couple of weeks. I feel calm as ever. Like nothing thesis breaking at all has happened with those three companies. And I've seen so many bears and value investors coming out, showing charts of where Palantir's valued and how it's so high on the P. I get it. High P, price of sales, high PE, all that good stuff. But what is really comforting is that people don't even know where to price this thing at. Like some analysts have it going to 115, 150, others have it going to 20. It's like a half and half. And then they say, well, the 8% budget cuts. The 8% budget cuts are going to be better for them because the things that actually deliver ROI are actually going to be what are kept. So it just shows you how much we really do have a lazy society and don't do a lot of research. We get a headline or we get some tidbits on a juicy clickbait, and then people just say, okay, well, I guess they're right? Instead of like looking and understanding what the company does. I saw someone else post, Antonio Lindris, who we see on X a lot. He said, right now it kind of feels like NVIDIA 2016. And I would 100% agree with that, because what people don't understand is the compounding effect. When you look at like how Salesforce got to be Salesforce, it took so long to get to that adoption where it actually grew, and then it was just mass adopted. Same thing with these chips with NVIDIA. It took a lot of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears from those employees to get to the vision, get to what happened, the planning, and then the expansion. And so you still have like half the world not knowing, understand, more than half the world not knowing what Palantir is. So I'm excited. I mean, this is just like another chance to get in basically right before earnings.
Amir, your thoughts on this 30% drawdown?
Palantir dropped 30%. I never watched. Well, we've kind of been saying this on the weeklies and in commentary that honestly, to me, it felt like it was just a matter of time before the stock crashed. I mean, there were no negative catalysts in forever in Palantir, not the business, not the stock. So on the pricing side, it was trading at over 100 times price to sales, 600 plus PE, and on the valuation side, it was getting close to impossible to tell a probable scenario that would justify trading at 125. And the only reason it even got there was because the business just had such momentum and there were no negative catalysts attached. I mean, Palantir was just executing over a very long period of time and there wasn't anything negative to latch onto. So that's why the business had momentum, and that also translated to the stock. So even though the news, for example, with the budget cuts, they weren't necessarily bad for Palantir. As you guys mentioned, you could even argue that any government spending decreases actually strengthens Palantir's proposition because they actually deliver value. And when you have less of a budget, you can't waste as much of that budget. It has to go to valuable contracts. And all I can say is that last time I made bank on Palantir, the business was getting stronger and the stock price was unjustifiably dropping. And that might be similar to what's happening now. Actually, I recently valued Palantir again, and the prices at the start of the trading day, I think it dropped to 78. That's not too far off from fair value to me. So, I mean, I'm getting excited to hopefully be able to buy Palantir again for the first time in what feels like forever. So yeah, I'm not upset or anything like that. I tend to never be, but yeah, I think it kind of was written on the wall. Like, I think most people expected it to have a pretty violent drop at some point in time, and that's just because there was nothing like negative. So even something adjacent like this budget cut news that we got, or like Alex Karp selling, or the usual thing, like just anything adjacent, even though it's not necessarily negative for Palantir, people took that and ran with it, and I think it was kind of written on the wall that it was just a matter of time.
Bears were craving for this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I noticed as soon as the drop happened. I think that the velocity of the drop is what shocked everybody. It was literally at 340. The headline of the budget cuts came out in the Pentagon, and I agree with you, Dom. That's bullish for Palantir, not bearish. And Palantir went from 120 to I think 12, and then the next day 100, and then the next day 95, and then now we're here at 85. And so it was a really quick 30% fall off, but it was also a really quick 30% move from 85 to 125. So I guess kind of the next question here is for the people that are afraid of how quick it went up and the fact that it might not ever get to 125 maybe until the next couple of years, right? It was one of those sort of moments where it reaches such a peak and it takes forever to reach that peak again. Or for the people that are still concerned, it could fall another 50% from here in regards to valuation. How are you guys thinking about the current price, the valuation, and the speed at which it went up and down, which is making people feel like there's no actual floor to this stock? Arnie, any thoughts on that?
Well, how do I feel the valuation? I believe here we are really talking about a very difficult environment, because typically when you evaluate a company, you try to understand the story, and depending on the story that you have, that story evolves into a certain direction with the metrics going into that direction. Therefore, also the valuation should converge to those moments. And the harsh reality is that in order to evaluate properly Palantir, we can just make an educated guess, because in order to say, okay, this is the correct price as of today, we should know what will be the future the future numbers. And even if we had like full Palantir stack, full stream with their own ontology, I believe there would be a big margin of error. Who knows? But so that is the premise, so that when we see the multiples, like right now, Palantir trading at 120 forward price to free cash flow and 53 EV sales, those numbers are obscene, but are obscene under the typical framework of a regular company like Costco, like I don't know, Walmart and so on. Like these are numbers that you would probably never find into these kind of companies. But here we are talking about something unique, something special, because for instance, differently from Snowflake, differently from ServiceNow, which both of them are clearly showing signs of reducing scalability as they grow. With Palantir, we are seeing the opposite. What I mean with that is, while these other companies, as they grow, they tend to become heavier or slightly worse in terms of efficiency, what we are seeing with Palantir is actually the opposite. It really looks like that the more Palantir grows, the better it becomes. And frankly, I believe we are still at very early stages from that. So a simple comparison can be seen, for instance, here. While CRM, Snowflake, and ServiceNow revenue per employee tends to grow, but is more or less stuck, is very gradually growing. With Palantir, we see that since the launch of AAP, the efficiency that Palantir is obtaining per employee is going to the moon. And this reflects the power of the platform, which essentially tells us Palantir is not investing much more money, but is delivering outside output. While when I see, for instance, Snowflake that just released the results, we just see that they are hiring people like nothing ever happened, and more or less they generate the same amount of revenue as Palantir. Snowflake literally has twice the number of employees to generate the same number of revenue. Someone tells AI, Palantir delivers. So this is the premise that we need to take in consideration when we talk about the valuation, because if we look too much at the metric side, we fail to capture the dynamic. And the dynamic that there is here is this effing company is growing a lot while not spending. That is like infinite ROIC, and infinite ROIC must be rewarded.
Well, Arnie, to push back here, wouldn't people say the reason it got to 125 is because people only cared about the narrative, the story you're talking about, and not the price of sales, the PE, et cetera? But that's how it got to almost a $300 billion market cap, which is why it collapsed so quickly.
Well, it's probably an overreaction from emotions, but emotions that were backed by results. Because what we are seeing in the last results that frankly really surprised me was that was not a gradual acceleration. That was a dominance play is actually in place. Like it looks like, let's make a comparison. Have you noticed how well Uber grew after COVID? So during COVID, you had a lot of competitors trying to catch up market share. But there was a fight going on. But then the competitors collapsed, Lyft stayed behind. And what happened to Uber essentially went into the take-all modality. What we are seeing with Palantir right now is a take-all dynamic into a huge market that is growing a lot. So it's like doors open, full field to conquer for Palantir. So what I see as a difference from the people I try to talk with that try to push me back on the valuation is like, okay, fair. The multiples are high again against the expectations, which are now more positive, but they tend to converge into that 30% margin and 30% growth. But what if actually this momentum keeps compounding and this 35% growth that we are currently having is just the beginning of the true acceleration growth? Because frankly, if the wind stays this strong and actually improves as Palantir can showcase more results and have this network effect compounding, I would not be surprised seeing a gradual acceleration toward the 50%, which is more or less where US commercial is actually driving the business at. So overall, and like long story short, yes, the multiples look expensive, but given all the development that we are currently seeing, literally everywhere, apart from Germany, literally everywhere, government side, the commercial side, I frankly see that the real risk here is underestimating how well stuff are going.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Matt, your thoughts on the current valuation and if there's more downside in your opinion?
I don't know. I'm actually kind of curious and surprised by the rhetoric that I'm hearing from the folks, hearing that they thought it was overvalued in the chat, and not necessarily the chat, but rather the panel here heard pretty much the opposite the last few weeks. But anyway, going to where I think the thought process that I have is it could obviously pull back further. But in terms of, do I think it's going to take forever to get back to that 125 level? No. And I think 2021 is a good example of that. I think when it hit $60 billion market cap for the first time, people were very much thinking that, okay, it peaked out in 2021. It's never going to get back to that place ever again. And obviously in 2024, we blew past $60 billion in market cap, and people start to see the true potential of the organization. Do I think we're, potential for downside? Of course. Like you guys stated, while it's a great business and I think it will eventually be a $1 trillion company, the numbers have to show up. Obviously, I think they have the mindset to get there. I think they have the foundation to get there, but the numbers unfortunately just have to show up for them to actually demonstrate how much value and importance that, I think a lot of people see and hear the importance, but do they actually feel the importance in terms of the actual numbers being there? And I don't think that's there as of yet. But in terms of, having the fundamentals, I think you have the fundamentals to at least build that foundation to get back to being a $500 billion to $1 trillion company. What else was I going to state there? Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious, and I want to push back to the panel. I mean, it's not like Palantir is isolated in this retracement. We're seeing a lot of other speculative or more high growth names being impacted with this as well. So we could be in this conversation next week, and the price could be back up to $95, depending on what the heck happens with the rest of news with tariffs and the ongoing discussions that are going on there. And we'll find out more about that Tuesday. So I'm a little bit surprised to hear that everyone is kind of saying, "Oh, overvalued," when in reality, just a few weeks back, everyone was saying, "Well, momentum is why people are trading the stock and buying the stock. It doesn't matter about valuations."
Momentum and valuation are completely different, right? Like from a valuation brand side, there's no way in God's green earth you can say that when it was trading at 500 PE or whatever, that's a normal valuation.
But I beg to differ, Dom. That's exactly what Amir and Arnie were saying just 3 weeks ago.
No, I didn't hear that. You didn't hear that from me.
No, I didn't hear for you. That's why I didn't say you.
I would look what I heard over the past couple of weeks. Quite frankly, even going into earnings, I think all of us thought it was going to tank at 85, which is where it's at right now.
I heard those words out of your mouth, Amit.
No, I think everyone here basically tried to figure out a way to justify why it was getting to 100 and 110. All of us were coming up with whatever analogies or conclusions, but I don't think anyone ever said the numbers themselves at 100 times price to sales made sense. Because, and here's the biggest evidence for that. Did any of us buy this thing at 125? Raise your hand. I mean, I don't think anyone realized. Arnie, I mean, what were your thoughts at 125? I don't think you thought it was the cheapest stock in the world.
Well, no, for me, it was like people want to pay me much more for this. And the more days go, the more they want to pay for the same thing. Okay, go ahead. I'll not follow you, but I'll be happy if you become crazy scared to add more. So in those situations, like the real risk is you start having a full momentum of the news flow that actually translates into business value. And maybe you are thinking, oh, but now at the next pullback, I will add. And that pullback essentially almost never happens. Like, for instance, isn't this like the risk as of today is having a dynamic like once it passed the $20 mark or the $30 mark, which was very hard to break into. And once it broke that, it's like everybody's craving now. Imagine if we had the opportunity to just buy Palantir at 30 with numbers as of today. So since we're not talking about a company operating into a mean reversion world, but we are talking about a company that is literally at the edge of potentially dominance. Once you keep winning, you keep winning. Like as you mentioned also, momentum keeps building momentum, and you never know. Like if rather than having a market dropping, we had like a press release, crazy press release of, oh, Palantir is working with Dodge, something like that. Maybe like we would have been already at a crazy 150, and we don't know. So my perspective on that is always have a position that keeps you a little bit detached, like motivated, but a little bit detached, so that these huge swings, which are like part of the routine with a very high beta stock with like Palantir, don't really affect your mind. Because if a sudden crash or a sudden spike changes your emotions, it means that probably you are overexposed.
Yeah, well, and it trades at a 3 times beta, right? And I should probably, so anytime anything trades at a 3 times beta, you're going to see bigger market drops for that stock than the normal market. But Matt, to continue on valuation, let me kind of clear up too with my comments. I look at 2 kinds of different valuation. I look at, there's what analysts want to see, which they can only see in their spreadsheets, which are the next, 6 months to a year on a PE and price to sales and what they consider is overvalued, undervalued. And so obviously, you can buy at 120. You may take a lot longer before you get additional growth from that 120 since we ran up so much. But as a long-term holder, I bet you'd still be happy with your returns. But since we've done so much homework on this company, we know, at least gradually of where, people will reasonably pay for that company and what it has been worth. But I think there's another type of valuation which is what we're all here about, which is the overall understanding of the true TAM and the expansion of what this ontology and what this technology does. All five of us understand this technology. And so obviously we're a little greedy, right? Like you don't want to buy it 120 when you know like, hey, I'll probably go back to, 100 or 80. But they only have, I'm looking here, 711 customers, guys. 711 customers that are doing this kind of revenue with zero debt. Do you know how many employees Snowflake has? No knock to them. There's just a lot of companies out there that need a lot of salespeople. They need a lot of marketing dollars. And this company doesn't do any of that. They don't do any marketing. They don't have very few salespeople. And they're closing business on their schedule, on their time, on growing and exponentially expanding. So I think we're just, we are really going to see that expand phase in the next, year or two and further down the line, because it's not like people are going to be ripping this out of their business once they get it going.
Just to tell you a number, Snowflake right now has 11,000 total customers, of which 700 belongs to the Forbes 2000. So, and Palantir, we are talking about 700 in total.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for growth. A lot of room for growth. Amir, your thoughts on our valuation?
Yeah, just on that last, before I forget the thought. The impressive part is even if Palantir acquired 0 customers in the fourth quarter, they still would have grew 20%, which just speaks to the argument that Arnie was making about the scaling up of existing customers and how exponential it is in nature. I think that's one of the most impressive things about Palantir. And so on the valuation side, just need to clear. I don't know what content of me Matt has been consuming, but I think I've been very consistent and public in giving out what I consider to be fair value. It has never exceeded 70 historically, more in the 50s and more recently 60s. In a video with Amit and in the past weekly, I shared a scenario while making it clear that it is not my valuation. A few times over, I said that a case can be made for $100 by using 30% growth and 60% free cash flow to the firm margins. That would justify $100 per share. But that's not my valuation, and that's not something I rely on. Maybe you are confusing that scenario with me saying that it's cheap, but that's not the case. Just want to clear that up. But as for the valuation, I recently revalued it. It's closer to 70 now, fair value for me personally, which is why I kind of got excited at the start of this trading day when it had this sharp drop. I was like, okay, maybe we're actually going to get an opportunity here. Not quite. It went down to 78 and closed out the day, I don't know where, 80.
So are you waiting for the precise tick to add?
I thought you don't look at the price, Amir.
No, but you need to keep in mind that while, like, let's say 70, right? 70 and 78, that's like over a 10% overvaluation. So, I'm fine with being patient, even though like the dollar amount isn't too big. Like like in my investment approach, I'm fine being patient, and I'm okay with that. Like we need to keep in mind that we're not living in a void where Palantir is the only equity available to us. I mean, there are tons of very, very strong businesses publicly trading that are available to us, and it's up to us to allocate money to where we believe that we are seeing potentials for strong returns. And for me, that means, I'm fine being patient. But I read in chat, like speaking to valuation, and I've gotten DMs like this after. So let's say, well, Palantir will get this contract or this contract. What happens to your valuation then? And I think people are forgetting that the current price that Palantir is trading at is already implying likely that Palantir will get this contract, this contract. Like for a valuation, if I have Palantir growing, let's say, for example, 40%, and they're not at 40%, that means my valuation already implies that Palantir will be receiving all of these contracts. So typically, because I'm very public with my valuation for Palantir will get a contract and someone will DM me, okay, what's the fair value now? I'm like, well, are they growing at 40%? Like it's already incorporated into it. Like I'm already expecting them to get these amounts of contracts. And speaking to that, I think it was really interesting to see Palantir held the DevCon this week, and we saw that XAI personnel were at DevCon presenting, implying that they use Palantir, which was really exciting. And we already know that Elon has been very positive towards Karp recently, and we've discussed the Doge, we've discussed the Tesla, SpaceX, and stuff like that historically. So I think the momentum is clearly there, and the people who are talking government efficiency are really leaning on to Palantir. So I think, as we mentioned, like even despite budget cuts, I think that might actually be very, very bullish for Palantir. And I might have underestimated the government growth, even though I have very high expectations of US government. I still think that, as Arnie mentioned, we may be making the mistake of undermining the true potential here. I mean, I think as Arnie mentioned, we can only throw out our best guess as to what it might look like. But yeah, not quite. It's still a bit expensive, but it's getting normalized. So I'm fine with just being patient here. According to my understanding of the business, it's somewhere around $70, I would say. Fair value to me currently.
Okay, you know that I'm a number guy, so I always like to try to check what is happening with some numbers, like to have a sense. What I'm learning more and more with Palantir as a guy who was living by making DCFs and equity reports is that it's important to have a sense of, okay, what is the price is currently implying, but then at least on my side, trying not to be too attached, because being too attached to numbers was the exact reason why I completely missed Tesla explosion, despite following the company for a long time and being sure that sooner or later it would have exploded correctly. But as an analyst, I was looking at the numbers too much without really understanding the context. So my bottom line is when you see something like, okay, the fundamentals keep improving. The price, yes, is expensive, but is somehow in very reasonable sense. And you see something like this, this chart that I like to post here and there of, okay, what is the current average analyst price showing compared with the actual price? And we see from this chart that essentially analysts tended to be over optimistic initially, but then they tend to stay behind the price, and especially at this range around the 20s, the analyst target price acted as a support, then again at 25 here a support, and we can see here how essentially the price moved way faster than analyst, and finally, after some exploding numbers in Q4, the average target price of analyst has risen up a lot, now converging to around what is this, like around 90, so the current average price. So will this act as a support again? We don't know, but frankly, I believe this is a relatively good hint that there is a way to justify from the institutional standpoint the current price, which also can give confidence to institutional investors of, okay, this is essentially the dip you were waiting for. You completely missed the run up, but now you could be happy to add. And this combined with the sentiment, which frankly became very bad in no time. Like I think we are much more sad now than we were happy 2 weeks ago when we had the initial spike.
Well, that's the thing. I think and this is the tough part about stocks, right? It's like once it goes up, again, personally, I feel most of us thought at 125 it was a bit ridiculous, and I was getting a lot of DMs from a lot of people as well, just like, dude, like it's valued basically at Salesforce's valuation with 1/15 of the revenue. Like it doesn't make sense. But the chart looks so ugly when it collapses from there but the collapse is inevitable, but it gets everyone so excited. And if no one actually sold at 125, that money was never real. And then the bears come out because like, see, we told you it was a bubble. And it's like, well, all of us already knew at 125 it was extended. So it creates all these dynamics. But at the end of the day, if it even has the ability to get there, hopefully in the long term, it actually can sustain it. In the short term, it just feels painful because obviously your net worth takes a hit.
I mean, remember that two guys that took the Nobel Prize for showing that we tend to suffer much more when we get a loss than we are happy when we get some gains.
I've been thinking, shout out to the guy. I'm sure Amit might know who I'm talking about. I don't know this individual personally, but there was this guy that I sometimes have in my thoughts and prayers, and I really hope that he got an opportunity to get out. But there was this guy, in the initial run up to 80, 85, he was posting on X how he's taking out like millions in margin to keep buying Palantir. And at the time, to me, I was like, this is the most insane thing I've seen. Like, this is like would top the charts on like Wall Street bets if in case this reverses. But then it went to 125 and he looked like a genius. And I just pray in my heart that he actually took some chips off the table, because if he like kept leveraging up to 125, shout out to that individual. Man, I don't want to know what happens to you here, but I really hope that he made the bank and managed to salvage some of that. But yeah, shout out to that guy, whoever you are. You are in my thoughts from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people obviously got pretty aggressive on the run up, and they were right until, we had a retracement, but we had a retracement back to where we were at the beginning of Q3 or right before the beginning of the Q4 results, right? So as painful as it is, it's still up 12% year to date, and it's not doing too bad. I want to talk about Karp. So the book came out February 18th. It is going kind of viral. It was number 4 at one point on Amazon's bestseller list. Here is Karp talking about it, and then we'll get into the marketing around the book.
I don't think in win-lose. I think in domination. So I don't like this win-lose thing because it kind of presupposes okay to lose. I like and I think domination is important because it's very hard to build. Like, it's very hard to build a business. And one of the real reasons it's hard is you've got to sit next to someone who is annoying you every cell in your body every day. And they may be right. So it's like every day you're dealing with somebody who is really annoying and they're wrong 9 times out of 10. But the 10th time they save your life. And so I think if it's just about money, if it's just about winning, if it's just about having prestige, for me, that's not enough to do that.
The book obviously goes deeper about Silicon Valley technology, what it means to embrace Western values. Dom, I know you started reading it. Any thoughts on the book so far?
Yeah, I'll just this paragraph in the opening preface sums up why I only have 3 stocks really that predominantly have 90% of my portfolio. It says, few asked what needed to be built and why. For decades, we have taken this focus and indeed obsession in many cases by the technology industry on consumer culture for granted, hardly questioning the direction, and we think misdirection of capital and talent to the trivial and ephemeral. Much of what passes for innovation today, of what attracts enormous amounts of talent and funding, will be forgotten before the decade is out. And when you just think about that and simmer on that, what those 3 founders are doing is much bigger impact to our world for the next decades and decades and decades beyond. And you could, probably put, I don't know the founder of Rocket Lab, but companies like that are looking to really get out there and change the world. Those are the type of companies you want to invest in. And you should be able to have the conviction to weather the storm because you know that they're pointing towards a true north, which Karp is, and his book illustrates that. And all 3 of those CEOs and all 3 of those companies are some of the hardest companies to actually get hired in. And they have some of the best cultures that are very flat organizations where there is no, Elon might walk by you in the factory right there and ask you a question, or Karp may come by in your brainstorm hackathon and say, I think you're wrong. So I think you got to really look at those things. I think there's just so much that people look on spreadsheets. I think there's so much more qualitative pieces that you get to look at. And if you bet on a person that, is shown time and time again, and this book just gives me even more conviction in their mission.
Matt, your thoughts on this book and basically it going viral, and it became a New York Times bestseller as well this week.
I haven't had the opportunity to read it, so I can't really comment on that. But I did think it was pretty interesting that the stock peaked the same day that it came out. But I think that's just a weird coincidence.
Did it? Did we peak at February 18th? We did? Okay. I did not know that. Here's a good comment right here from the chat that I think is a good question. Someone says, I'm bullish Palantir and all, but just funny how Elon's work on Doge is framed as a distraction, but Karp's writing a book is good for Palantir, kind of implying, wouldn't this mean that Karp is distracted? Amir, any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's very, very different, because the book furthers Palantir's agenda and ethos and mission statement, while Doge is frankly a very large distraction, in my opinion. I mean, he's not present. Now, you could say that Tesla is mature to the point where Elon being away for a couple of months is not the end of the world, and he seems to keep up to date with FSD schedules and stuff like that, and the robotaxi is coming out in a couple of months. So you could make that argument, but it's very, very different. Like, it's not a distraction for Karp to write a book that essentially, to my understanding, I haven't got my copy yet, but to my understanding, like, dismantles legacy way of thinking about tech and furthers the way that Palantir thinks about tech. So I think it's the opposite. It's actually strengthening Palantir that he actually took the time to write this book. I think it's not a distraction at all. It's a very different dynamic there.
Both of those, one, the book was written a year ago, so it's not like he wrote it anytime recently. The book was done a whole year ago. And two, what Elon and what this book is meant to do is to really get our technology companies and the people that read the book to think about an American first way of thinking, which our culture and society has completely abandoned and what our country was founded on. It's really sad. It only takes 2 generations for something to completely just be washed out from tradition. So I think he just felt it was necessary. And obviously what Elon's doing is we can all agree very necessary in our government. So we've strayed quite a bit from what our country and what technology was in the 40s and 50s and how they participated versus now.
You know, with the comments regarding spreadsheets, I might not even read the book. I might torch it,
Yeah, I would agree as well. I don't think a book tour is distracting. I think it's the ability for Karp to reach different audiences, which is kind of the thesis I've had since I heard a book was coming out. And it's a chance for audiences to know about Palantir and to learn about this company, right? And when you become a New York Times bestseller, it's just your message being magnified, which is what the job of a CEO is supposed to do. Elon is trying to solve the deficit, which is a little bit harder of a problem than going on a bunch of podcasts and talking about your book. So I do think if it's a distraction in the sense that it takes a couple hours a week from Karp's life to go do some interviews, but that the ROI on that I think is much bigger than that. Arnie, any thoughts on Karp's book going viral this week?
Well, I believe every CEO tries to find his best way to optimize the return on the time invested. So in the case of Elon, for instance, people now criticize him for spending time at Doge rather than spending time on Tesla. But what if that is actually the smartest way to open the doors but truly unlock the value of Tesla? And frankly, I believe focusing the government into stuff that Elon thinks is important eventually will pay off for Tesla. With Karp, it's a similar dynamic. The fact that now he has an asset as a book that is very, very well received, that there is a very good market fit with what people start to realize that, we need to be competitive in technology. We can't really sleep. And we see this also from what I like to follow in terms of institutional investors that understand technology, like there is a broader acceptance that there is the need of a technological reindustrialization in the US. And I believe this talks well to what is happening. Like the interviewer essentially asked, but you wrote this book last year, and it seems like you wrote it like last week, because that perfectly matches what is the current sentiment and gives an explanation and a direction. So essentially, when we invested in Palantir, we were not only invested in the business generating free cash flow, but essentially we bet that this guy actually had some value that was not really appreciated by the market. And it turns out that with Alex Karp essentially being appreciated even by Donald Trump, we set a record of how strongly Alex Karp is perceived. There is not only one guy that is important into the niches, in the underground, in the shadows, but even publicly is perceived as a person as strong as Elon Musk, able to shape the direction of not only Palantir, but also creating a movement inside the government and inside the thinking groups. So I'm very positive of Karp sharing this book, and I'm super happy to see that he also timed it very well. Like the fact that Palantir is now perceived as a good company makes his personal brand like loop with the reputation of the business and each other. So Karp and Palantir have never been in a more strong position, and frankly, everything that amplifies this perception is also good for the business, but also good for the US, because the US, from outside, it seems like it lost a little bit its way. It started thinking too much of things that are important, but are marginally important compared with the US needs to prosper in order for the whole world to stay competitive and safe.
Right.
You know, I love that comment that he wrote it a year ago, but it seems like he wrote it last week. And that's been the case with Karp like forever. That's the thing that we've been saying and noting. Not only like, first and foremost, the business. They stated that, well, this is software that people need, but they don't yet know it. Like we are X amount of years ahead. And then we had Karp start predicting geopolitical events like years before it happened. We had Karp tell analysts what they will be thinking in a couple of years before it happened. And now we have this, like the man is truly something else. Like, well, what do the kids say these days? Like built different, or is that?
Dude, you are a kid. What are you talking about? Like, but yes, absolutely. He is built different.
No, he is him. I think that's what
him. You're tapped in.
Him.
You're tapped in. Absolutely. Okay, so here's the last topic for everybody. Do you guys realize we've barely gotten any press releases the past 2 months? Like we had the earnings press release, and then we kind of had this like partnership they're doing with some company in France the other day. But what is your guys' take on the fact that by now, a couple of years ago, Palantir would have like 10 different new companies and partnerships, yada, collaborations. I think they're just executing and they don't care about like showing off via some corporate press release. But what is your guys' take on that, Dom? Start with you.
Yeah, I mean they're focused. You saw Chad posting like heads down, we're mission on mission. You know, you haven't seen much from Ileano. Like you only have 3,900 employees, so you know you can celebrate for 2 seconds and do your little dance at 125. And then they know they got to get back on mission. I mean, this is a very mission-driven culture and company, very unique. You guys have met the people. You guys have been in the office, so I mean, you know what it's like. They're not trying to get people super excited. They know the numbers will speak for themselves. So, you know, imagine if they have a growth quarter next quarter that shows 40 or 50% and shocks everybody. You know, so they're just focused on doing it their way, which I've grown to love because I know that they're going to stay focused and be good stewards of their money and fiscally responsible. And the product is beyond, you know, amazing.
Anyone else have a take on no press releases over the past couple months?
Yeah, I think press releases may not be like plenty, but public appearances are. I mean, let's just take the past week. Like we had the XAI thing, Trump's personal greeting. We have the book tour. We have Stromer coming out personally, like the I don't know if they call him prime minister. I guess they do, of the UK. Great Britain going out and meeting up with Palantir like straight after meeting up with Trump. I mean, they are doing a lot of stuff. So I don't know if press releases like means that like is something to use as a gauge. I mean, they've been plenty in the public eye recently, so I don't think too much about it personally. I think they have a lot of positive attention in the media, and I think that's a good substitute. Even though we don't get like, yeah, we partnered up with X, like typically we don't get any kind of details there anyway, like contract amount of years. Like they're very scarce with that. We just get like some overview typically. So I'm personally fine with just having stuff like this instead. And I think this image that you're showing off now in particular really sets the tone on the eve of Europe gaining their independence by saying that they will rely less on the US and starting their own coalition of increased defense spending and stuff like that. All of that benefits Palantir. Even though, you know, recently, yeah, recently we had there are some talks about the US and Ukraine, for example, where people seem to think that keeping this war ongoing benefits Palantir. I think it's the opposite, because if you all recall, Karp always speaks about strength through deterring our adversaries, which means that in times of peace, that's when you actually need to bolster up and make yourself so threatening to adversaries that they don't even think about going to war with you. So I think rebuilding Ukraine, we know that Palantir has a deal with BlackRock and some others to rebuild Ukraine. I think peace would be very good for Palantir. I don't even know if they started charging for their software in Ukraine. We know that they gave them to Ukraine for free. I don't know if Palantir has seen any dollars from that. So yeah, very positive momentum, even though no PRs are being put out on the website. I think that we're seeing them in the public eye a lot recently.
Matt, your thoughts on?
I think one of the things as well, you know, over the past 12 to 18 months, we've really seen a shift into people thinking Palantir is a positive force within the United States and across the world. And before that, if you guys remember when they were really trying to get the NHS deal and all the smear campaigns that were out there, you know, obviously I feel like on the back of that, you really needed to make sure that your brand was out there, who you're partnering with was out there, to really make people understand that, hey, we're a great company, we're doing things for the better, we're partnering with health systems, we're partnering with hospitals to make sure that, you know, people are getting better faster and things of the like. Now that you're more so in the good graces of the world, it seems like, in my opinion, based off of the visibility that I've seen the company with, I feel like if you were to continue to kind of put out too much information, it might seem like you're trying to pile on a little bit. So I feel like I can see a good strategic shift back. They're not trying to hide or anything like that. They're not trying to lack transparency. I don't view the company in that sort of lens. The culture is still very strong there. But I think now that you've gotten a little bit of love and things are starting to head in the right direction, it almost might seem like gloating if you continue to kind of put out as many press releases as they previously were. As people like us, when the stock was below $100 billion market cap, we were excited because we were saying, okay, look, you can kind of see these guys are actually the real deal. Now I think everyone recognizes with how much they've been able to sponsor, like the Reagan conference and many other great conferences, people are starting to recognize, okay, these guys are the real deal. I don't think they need to prove it anymore. So I'm with you, Amit. I think you stated it perfectly. Maybe it was Dom. So apologies, I don't remember which one of you said it, but it's basically like now it's just time to get back to delivery and actually just focus on that rather than putting press releases in people's face.
I think also too, like we have to realize if you've invested in this company as long as we have, you have to trust the management team.
Yeah.
We're not looking for all. Yeah, we'd like them to partner with more and scale more, but you got to trust the management team, and they have a good pulse. And to Amir's point, man, dude's been like Nostradamus lately, just predicting things left and right, and then they happen. So, they have zero debt. I mean, and $4+ billion in cash. So it's not like they're going, under if they have a bad quarter or whatever. They're focused on doing it their way, doing it the right way. And I think they understand the business side of things a lot more than what people give them credit for.
I tend to think that the press releases are a tool to communicate to the outside what is happening, but also the narrative that the company tries to share. We need to think, I believe we are all content creators here, and we know that, for instance, if we just do the same stuff, even if it is valuable for like 2 months non-stop, you reach a saturation point where it's not interesting any longer. So we need to think of press releases as shots of a bazooka that help you shape, oh, this actually happened. Let's try to understand better what is happening. Give me a signal. And frankly, I was surprised as well that compared with the past quarters, we essentially had an entire month with just 1-2 press releases of deals, and seems very bad considering the fact that as Palantir grows, the marginal client to acquire is easier. So that could be scary at first sight, but in reality, what they're seeing is just maturing. Then the parallel that I have is for people that have been following us for a long time, when the valuation was very low, we spent literally a lot of time at Palantir Weekly trying to dissect the financial metrics. People may know that also on X, I was sharing a lot of charts on the financial metrics, showing why, while the narrative was very bad, I thought, okay, but this is the reality that is emerging, which is actually positive. If I did exactly that now, that would be boring. And now people realize, oh, Palantir is a good company. So as the time evolves, also the kind of content you need to share needs to evolve and needs to speak to the context that is actually happening. This doesn't mean that I will not talk about financial metrics any longer. It just means that talking about financial metrics right now is important, but less important than really understanding the context that is also beyond the financial metrics. This to say that the same thing happened with a company. Maybe right now press releases are not that strategical as they were to set the momentum, to set the narrative of, oh, Palantir is actually delivering. Oh, Palantir is actually delivering value in so many verticals, and not only many verticals, but in so many use cases. We are now at the point where essentially Palantir is trying very gradually to mapping all the potential use cases in the enterprise. So I believe the deals will keep arriving, but the real focus now was into shaping the message that Karp and the management are trying to push on, maybe more on the book side, on the technological importance, on the politics. I think it's not a random thing that we are seeing Sham more into politics. We see Louis Mosley being more public into what Palantir is doing in the UK. So I believe the perception now wants to be more into the government side, because maybe my speculation is the momentum on the commercial side is keep building on itself, while on the government right now there is the opportunity to push more. And since there's also the Doge influence, there is a very big opportunity to make the US government side go very well. Because I think there was some hints in the last financial release that they really believe the opportunity on the US government is still very untapped. So my speculation is they're trying to push to create more momentum in the government side. And if they just bombarded us with like every week a press release, the marginal press release would be just another one. While this way,
Playing the
they
long
can
game.
capture a wave.
They're playing the long game. Like they don't have, I mean, the stock is very healthy now. So to your point, Arnie, do they need to send press release every time they close a deal? Or do they need to have Sham out there shaking hands and kissing babies with big foreign leaders and Karp talking to the prime minister? Like they're trying to secure contracts for long term.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree with everything you guys are saying. Like the press releases at this point now are just like, it's nice to see them, but it's not about educating the public that they're a real company like it was 2 years ago. So if they have a big one, then yeah, they put it out. But these small partnerships that they need to do to like legitimize themselves, they're already legitimate, right?
More DevCons, do more DevCons. Like the more that they keep scaling that market and keep getting developers getting their hands on this, it's going to really blow up.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that is it for us on Palantir Weekly. We will be back next week. I think the big thing this week to cover was just the stock declining, but obviously it is what it is. It happens. This is part of being an investor in the markets. And yeah, DevCon was
Shout
awesome.
out to you, Amit. 200 episodes, man. That's a
Well,
lot.
shout out to all of us, right?
I haven't been there for all of them, but I know you, Arnie, and Matt, and Namir have been there for most of them.
For a ton of them. Yeah, well, this is, I forgot, this is episode number 200. It's cool, dude.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's almost 4 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a world, dude. But what happens when we get to episode number 500? I mean, like, it's just.
I mean, dude, it's crazy now. Like, I have family members that'll text me out of nowhere, like, Palantir, so thankful you had me talk about, like, I didn't know what I was buying, but you just kept talking about it at Thanksgiving, So
I think that's the cool thing as well. A lot of us told friends or family when it was like $10, like, hey, I'm like part of this. Yeah, like just trust me. Like I'm part of this online secret community. There's like 100 of us on Friday nights at 1 a.m. We listen to these random guys talk about it. And it's like, I've heard these stories from people at the meetups I've been having this year. And they're like, I told everyone in 2022 that I follow these guys on YouTube. I think they know what they're talking about. I put a lot of money into you. And then, obviously the stock did what it did and they're getting all the credit. Like they're the biggest stock genius. So they think we're the biggest stock geniuses, where in reality, none of us are. We just got obsessed with.
I like what Randy said. He said at episode 500, maybe it'll be $500 a share. That would be pretty awesome.
That would be pretty awesome.
I had a similar thing. I had this colleague at work. He just came up to me like, yeah, man, I made a lot of money in Palantir. I'm like, you invest in Palantir? He's like, yeah, I've been following your content and I've been seeing Palantir. I'm like, do you even know what they do? He's like, no. And that's and then he told me, yeah, and I also made a lot of money in Rocket Lab. And I'm like, I don't even post about Rocket Lab. He's like, oh, maybe it was someone else then. He's just like buying.
He's probably following me.
Yeah, Matt.
You're way better looking, so I don't know how they can confuse us. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't okay, let me be real. I've never told a single family member ever or friend about any stock because I'm so scared to be accountable. I just want to be accountable for my own decision. So kudos to you for enriching people around you. I don't know how you find that confidence to do that. I'm so scared. Like I would never in my life ever take. By the way, you should probably buy this. Like I don't know how you guys do it.
I needed a win because I told my family to buy a biotech stock in 2020 that I thought was going to solve cancer, and they lost a little bit of money on that. So I needed a biotech. I needed to make back that money. So. I've never had that fear of, oh, what happens? I'm like, nope, they're my family. They're never going to disown me. And Palantir worked out, and Robinhood. They loaded up on Robinhood a lot. So,
all right, guys. Well, this has been fun.
All right, cool stuff. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week. And thank you for tuning in to Palantir Weekly. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.